Hello, welcome to this week's video. This week we're going to talk about ergonomics and the lathe, and it all started last year when I broke my tennis racket. It was an old wooden tennis racket that I'd had for over 40 years. I had it when I was playing tennis at school and have used it ever since. And when I broke it, I was given an aluminium racket playing some night competition last winter. It only lasted one night, and I ended up getting tennis elbow, and it was excruciating pain. Finally got treatment for it. It was hard when I was playing tennis, and it was very sore when I was using the lathe and if I was doing any wood carving. So it made me think about how my lathe was set up and whether it was set up correctly, if that had caused some of the tennis elbow. I checked out Google on the computer to look to see how you would set up a lathe and how you'd stand at a lathe, but there was no information on the computer that I could find. It was mainly relating to office workers sitting or standing at a computer, but the idea was basically the same. They basically said that you had to maintain good posture, you had to avoid twisting and turning, and you had to be relaxed and keep your elbows close to your sides, and that's fairly similar to what you do on a lathe. And when you see some of my projects that I do, I turn a lot of wood that I get out of a paddock or off the side of the road, so they're not completely round, and it takes a little while to get them into the round state. So I do put a fair bit of stress on my hands and elbows and shoulders. So I thought I'd look into how I approach the lathe, try to keep my feet square to the lathe. I have the tool up against my hip at most times, so I keep my arms and my elbows fairly tight against my body and then move the tool along the tool rest. But one thing I did notice when I was looking at the old videos was that the tool handle was always down below the tool rest, at the top of the tool rest. To get it level, I needed to lift my shoulder or lift my elbow. So obviously there is an issue there, and I gathered that the lathe was a bit too high, and I was trying to compensate for the height of the lathe. So I grabbed the laser level and I checked the level of the spindle center, and it came out at 45.25 inches high was the center of the lathe. And then I checked to see where my elbow was when it was in a relaxed state, and it was around 42.5 inches. So there's about just under 3 inches difference between where the lathe should have been. It was a bit too high. It was around 70 mil or just under 3 inches. So I had a couple of options. One was to stand on a platform and have a platform around the lathe, but I'm getting a bit older, my attention span's not the best, so I gathered that after 20 minutes or half an hour at the lathe I'd step backwards and I'd fall off the platform. So that was discounted, that idea. Over Christmas I was talking to my older brother who's an engineer, and I was explaining my dilemma, and lo and behold, a couple of days later he sends me a plan of a lathe stand. And so I checked all the measurements to make sure they're okay, and then he got some 1.6 galvanized steel and laser cut it, folded it, and then sent it over to me, where I put an undercoat on it and then painted it with a hammer tone finish. It was a charcoal colour, so it matched the stand that was already there. So I then put it together. There's quite a few bolts to put it together. It's a fairly sturdy stand. Peter's put a tray in the middle so I can put things in the tray, and it can probably gather a lot of the wood shavings as well, so I'll have to keep cleaning it out. But it's a great addition to the lathe. Then of course I'm fairly stubborn, so I had to move the lathe without any help, and it was fairly heavy, that lathe. I was able to take the old lathe stand away and put the new one on and get the lathe onto it after a bit of huffing and puffing. And I've tried it a few times and it's a lot better. I'm not lifting the shoulder like I used to. It just feels a lot better than what I was doing before. Obviously I'm a slow learner. I should have done this years ago, but it's done now. This video was more about just checking my stance, checking where I am in relation to the lathe, the setup, whether my shoulders were relaxed, all those sort of things. And it certainly made me aware that the lathe was too high. So we fixed all that now, so there shouldn't be any excuse now for turning out any poor quality pieces. Yeah, so that's about it. I hope you enjoy this video. I'll see you next time. Cheerio.